Welcome back, everyone. For today's video, we are going to be taking a look at an event which is being held in New York City. Now, the event in question is the 1000 GM 6-day Summer Invitational Tournament. Now, competing in this tournament is the famous YouTuber and international master Levy who is playing in the IM section. So what does that mean? It means that he cannot get a Grandmaster norm, but if he plays well against some players who are aspiring to become international masters, he could gain quite a few rating points. Now, first round, Levy playing with the black pieces against FM Danila Polyanikov, who represents the United States. As you'll notice, Levy a little bit higher rated, over 100 points, and let's dive right into the action. So, the game starts with the move e4, Levy plays c6, we get knight c3, and now we have the move d5, and here knight f3 is played. Now, this is what is known as the two knights attack in the Caro-Kann. White rejects pushing the pawn to d4 and tries to develop these knights immediately. Levy takes on e4, knight takes e4, and now we have the move knight f6 being played, and here queen e2 is played by his opponent. Knights get traded, and Levy goes bishop e6. Now, the reason Levy plays bishop e6 here is that he's very worried that if he plays something like g6, for example, White can put the bishop on c4, scope out the diagonal, followed by d3, and now both of the bishops become super active. So Levy goes bishop e6 to stop bishop c4. Now, White could obviously play it anyway, but after the trade here with only bishops and knights on the board, Black should be completely fine. So bishop e2 is played, Levy goes knight d7, d4, and now we get knight to f6, queen to f4, and Levy plays the move g6, trying to finish his development by fianchettoing the bishop to g7. We get castles, bishop g7, and now the move c4 is played, and Levy decides to play bishop g4. Now, the computer likes this move queen d6 here, trying to trade off the queens. I suspect Levy rejected any notion of trading the queens, because after the queen trade occurs here and White plays a move like bishop d3, rook e1, and bishop f4, it's very hard to see either side being able to win here due to the symmetrical pawn structure. So Levy goes bishop g4, rook e1 is played, Levy castles, we get the move bishop e3, and now Levy plays e6. Now, this is a very, very critical moment in the game, because at this point, you'll notice from the time situation, both players have about 1 hour and 10 minutes on the clock. Now, in this position, Levy's opponent, Danila, spends 25 plus minutes on this move h3. Now, I was doing live commentary of this game, and I thought it was a little bit closer to 30, but nonetheless, this is simply an unacceptable decision. Now, you're probably thinking to yourself, well, what's the big deal? Why spend so much time? Now, the reason this is such a big deal is because when you look at this position, Levy has played this move e6. So in any world here, Levy is going to trade the bishop for the knight down the road. So if that's the case here, you should simply play h3 immediately, force Black to trade, and then you'll have 25 plus minutes down the road to use at a critical juncture in the game. So this is simply a huge mistake by Levy's opponent. Obviously, it's not a mistake on the board, but as we're going to see, this is a severe error. So after h3 takes, we get queen a5 from Levy, a3 played, and here Levy goes rook a d8. b4 is played, and now Levy plays this move queen a4. Now, probably the best move here is to go queen f5, simply trading the queens off the board, but because White has the two b's here and it's a simplified endgame, White really has no risk of ever losing in this position, and I suspect because Levy is higher rated, he did not want to trade the queens. So Levy goes queen to a4 here. We get rook ec1. Another move here, by the way, that Levy's opponent spends nearly 20 minutes on. Nothing wrong with spending a bunch of time here, but imagine if you had 30 more minutes at this point in the game. You could probably spend the time and still have a time advantage on the clock. So you get rook c1, and now Levy plays move queen b3, which is a surprisingly serious mistake, all things considered. Computer wants Levy to play the move knight to e8, rerouting the knight to d6 to pressure the pawn on c4, or to go to f5 and put pressure on the pawn on d4 in this position. Levy goes queen b3, a move that looks okay, and here, shockingly, his opponent finds the best move, queen c7, and after rook d7 and queen to a5, as you'll start to notice, the bar is inching up in White's favor. Now, the main reason for this is that Levy has a couple of problems. He is basically having to deal with threats of d5 or b5 here to open the diagonals for the two bishops, and he really doesn't have a whole lot of activity. So we get a6 here. In this position, a4 played by Polyanikov, and now Levy plays move knight e8. Now, it's still relatively okay for Levy, but the game is starting to spin a little bit in a tough direction. The main reason for this is that if Levy could put the rook on d8, let's just say king h1 and knight e8 here, the rooks are stabilized in the center, putting pressure on the pawn and this potentially open d file, and White's ideas with b5 and d5 are simply a little bit slow. But in this position after a4, Levy has to play knight e8 because he doesn't have time to put the rook on d8. If he were to go rook d8 here after b5, takes, rook b1, queen a4, takes. Black is still probably okay after knight to e8, but white is the one trying to win the game here after the move bishop to g5. So we get knight e8 from Levy. His opponent plays b5 here. Levy takes, we get takes, and now the move c takes b5 is played by Levy. Now this move is another mistake. In this position, the computer wanted Levy to play bishop takes pawn, and after takes, and a move like rook b1, queen d3, and c5. White is better here with this pass pawn going up the board, but it's still very much a game. So Levy instead plays this move c takes b5, which is a very serious blunder, but his opponent plays the move rook a b1 after a 3-minute think. Now this is why I stressed earlier, and I cannot stress this enough, when you have simple moves, you should simply play them in a couple of minutes instead of spending nearly 30 minutes, because I do firmly believe in my heart of hearts, if Levy's opponent here had 40 minutes on the clock, he probably finds the best line, which is rook a3, queen b2, rook a2, queen b3, and this move bishop to d1, targeting the queen. Now you probably wonder, why is this better? The reason this is better is because after queen e3 and queen takes b5 here, now the rook is under pressure, the pawn on b7 is under pressure, and white has a serious advantage. Actually, I didn't explain that super well, so I'll explain why in a second. Whereas after rook a b1, now Levy can play the move queen to a4, forcing the queens off the board. If Levy were to go queen d3 after queen b5, he's in a world of hurt, very close to losing the game, which is why this move rook a3 is better, because it takes away queen a4, and then the queen has to go here. And structurally, with these two pawns on c4 and d4, and the weak pawn on b7, black is in a lot of trouble. So after rook b1, Levy plays the move queen to a4 here correctly, and now Levy has survived the worst of it because queens are going to come off the board. So his opponent takes, we get the swap of queens, and now Levy's opponent makes another mistake by taking the queen with the rook. If he were to take with a pawn here, which looks a little bit awkward, white is a little bit better here due to this weak pawn on b7, this pawn on b6 pushing forward with rook c7 threats as well. Still probably okay after knight d5, rook b5, and something like f5 to bring the king to the center, but this pawn on b7 is always a serious weakness, and if anybody is better here, it is the player with the white pieces. Instead, he takes with the rook, which now gives Levy time to play knight d6, targeting the rook on b5, hitting the pawn on c4, and guarding the pawn on b7 at the same time. Here, Polyanikov plays rook b6, and now Levy correctly plays knight to f5, winning this pawn on d4. Now, another thing that I talk about a lot in chess that's really important is understanding when to slow the game down. Now, this is something that many players at the lower level fail to understand, and by lower level, I actually mean like master level or around IM, where you feel like you're pressing the whole game, you're trying to win, you've been better, you know you're better, and then when the advantage is gone, there's this sort of this failure to admit that you've made a mistake and be like, okay, I messed it up, let's just make the draw. You know, I'm not happy that I didn't win the game, but at least I didn't lose. Now, sometimes it's very hard to shift that mindset, and as we're going to see, Polyanikov fails to do that. He plays the move rook takes b7. Now, if I were playing this game, I would have played the move d5, and after takes, and something like rook to e8 here, position is very balanced. Let's just say king f2. You can probably sack the rook for the pawn and draw the game with bishop h6, but even if you don't do that and you play something like bishop h6, rook c3, and rook e7, very limited opportunity. Frankly, you can't lose this position due to the opposite color b's, and you'll survive. Polyanikov instead cannot admit that he has messed it up, and now he takes, and after rook b8, he goes bishop a6. Now, once again, another opportunity for white to bail out with bishop e4, and after takes, and let's just say e takes f5, king f2. Both sides have a rook and 4 pawns on the board. If anybody is better, perhaps it is black here, but the game should be a draw. So instead, Polyanikov again decides to keep the game going with the move bishop a6, and now Levy plays the move rook b6. We get bishop b5, and here Levy takes the pawn on d4, and material has evened out. Now, white does have the 2 b's here, or the bishop pair, but the big problem for white objectively in this position is that white cannot push this pawn up the board. So for example, if black can ever get some situation, I'm just setting this up here, something like this where the knight blockades the pawn, this bishop cannot really attack anything here. The knight stops white from pushing, and black is definitely a little bit better. So After bishop takes d4, again, Polyanikov plays the move bishop g5. Bishop f4 would have been a slightly better move, and here Levy spends quite a bit of time before playing the move king g7. Now, the computer does prefer the move knight d6, pressuring the bishop on b5, as well as allowing for a few tactics. If white goes bishop d8, for example, after rook b7, bishop c6, and rook b2, suddenly black has the kebab on the second rank, and black is doing very, very well. Levy uses a lot of time here before playing the move king g7, and now we have the move rook to d1 being played. Completely reasonable move. Levy plays h6, and here Polyanikov blunders the game away with this move bishop to d8. Now it's funny because when I was doing my live coverage of the game on Kick, I did point out very briefly that bishop to d8 would lose the game, and I didn't really expect him to play it, but he blitzes out the move. Now in this position, after the move bishop to f4 and e5 and g4, white is still probably completely fine. Even something like bishop to d2 here, and black is only marginally better. Probably after e5, the reason I would say black is better is because you can't push the pawn. The bishop is glued here. Their ideas like knight d6, rook f6, and with the wooden shield in the middle of the board, once again, I think it's a lot easier for black to play. But Polyanikov plays this move bishop d8, and Levy does not miss this opportunity. He plays the move rook to d6, pressuring the bishop on d8 and effectively winning the game. Now you're probably wondering, well, why does this win the game? It wins the game because, let's just say white moves the rook, you take the bishop, extra knight on the board, you win the game. And when Polyanikov decides to sack the rook here, after rook, actually I should say, if Polyanikov were to move the bishop here, there's bishop takes pawn, checking the king, creating the vaunted fossil, and after takes and rook takes d1, black has a rook and a pawn for the bishop and will win the game. So Polyanikov has to sack the rook, but now Levy simply has a rook for a bishop, and he's going to win the game. We get bishop c7, knight d6 played here by Levy. Polyanikov trades the bishop for the knight, and now the game is over after g3, rook g3, e5, king f1, rook d2, king to e1, and the move rook c2. And here Danila Polyanikov resigns the game because Levy simply is stopping white from pushing the c pawn up the board. And one sample line is basically eventually black will bring the king closer. You push the pawns up to f4, takes. Eventually you go here, e3, takes, and now you go f3, followed by rook c1, f2, and f1 queen, and black will win the game in short order. So after rook c2, Polyanikov resigns this game. Levy gets a very, very critical win. This game could have gone either way. Levy definitely could have lost if Polyanikov had more time on the clock. Probably also should have been a draw well into the end game. But at the end of the day, I like to say that chess is a game where you get rewarded or punished for your mistakes. And unfortunately for Polyanikov in this game, he made one very big mistake. He spent a bunch of time, 25 plus minutes on this move h during the opening, when it's a move that he should have spent 1 minute on. Not having that time later on in the game hurt him immensely, and he was not able to find the right moves, and Levy gets the win. So while you could feel bad for him, I like to say that in chess you get what you deserve. And his mistake spending all that time on a very obvious and simple move, forcing the trade of the bishop to give him the two bishops and the bishop pair, was something that came back to haunt him, and he loses the game. And I think in many ways it's a deserved victory for Levy. He defended very well. Time did play a huge role later on in the game, and Levy gets that win. Very important also because it's the first round of the event. If Levy were to lose that game, he'd definitely be feeling unsure of himself, feeling nervous, and with that win, he's very much on track. So Levy gets a win in the first round of this 1000 GM summer 6-day summer invitational tournament. He's off to a good start with a win in the first game. Tomorrow there will be 2 games being played, rounds 2 and 3. So we will see what's going to happen in those games. But Levy gets a great win in the first game, starts off the tournament in style, despite it being shaky, and we're all rooting for him. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this recap from the first round of the 1000 GM Summer 6-Day Invitational Tournament being held in New York City. If you are not already subscribed to the channel, make sure that you smash that subscribe button below, and we'll be back with more recaps throughout the week. I do apologize if I'm a little bit sweaty, but it is really hot here in California, so it is what it is. But at any rate, hope you guys enjoy the game as we cheer on Levy in this tournament, and I'll see you guys very soon. Have a good one. Bye.